To the story now, the business landscape is evolving and women are driving that change. In fact, South Africa has one of the highest percentages of female entrepreneurs, and that is according to the Veuve Clicquot 2020 Barometer, which measured 17 countries. This is encouraging news for the businesswomen of tomorrow. Connie Matlejoane, who owns CRM Enterprise, joins us now for some advice on how to get the seat at the table. Connie, thank you so much for your time this morning. A very good morning to you. It certainly is encouraging in the South African context to see how many female entrepreneurs there are. But I always say that as much as there may be a lot of female entrepreneurs, how many of them get the opportunity to scale their businesses up so that it's not just a small enterprise, but we see more black female-owned businesses in particular who are able to become medium enterprises and therefore scale up to becoming major corporations. But how are we faring in that regard?
Good morning, Faith. Thank you for having me. You know what? I think the business world and especially the corporate market is ready for female enterprises. We are making strides. There's more and more opportunities being opened up for women. So we are in the right direction. I think the ground is fertile for female entrepreneurs to go out there and succeed in the corporate space.
The only thing is that COVID-19 has unfortunately showed us that a lot of the businesses that got affected were businesses that were also owned by women. That as much as we do have opportunities or the land being fertile, so as it were, for women to be in business, however, being in business also takes a lot of capital injections, capital where women don't have. In fact, if you look at the South African statistics when it comes to female unemployment, black young women, for example, about 50% or so of them are unemployed in this country, obviously leaving that to get into the business arena. So if there's no capital investment, there's no clients, access to markets and the like, though the land may be fertile, but unfortunately the red tape unfortunately still exists.
It does, and I think it's if you look at women in terms of funding and applying for funding and things like that, you're 100%. It's hard to get the funding. But what I've found over the past few years is that more and more corporate clients or corporate companies, they have enterprise development programs. And sometimes you can look them at face value and think that they are of no help, but they really do help. So I encourage women to be part of those. Whenever I get an opportunity to be part of an enterprise development program, go in there because that's where we make our voices heard. People that put together these enterprise development programs, they don't know what women go through. So it's up to us to highlight those challenges and make sure that the solutions come from what we suggest, from what we recommend, and also from the planning that companies have. So I think there is a lot of more networking that needs to be done amongst women. We must not isolate ourselves. We have to be there for one another, encourage one another, advise. You know, when you found help, let the other women know that this is how I went about it. So, but I think the opportunities are there.
Yeah. So you're talking here particularly when it comes to enterprise development. Enterprise development will require some stringent compliance, right? And that compliance needs to be met. And compliance sometimes can take time, and not only take time, but can also become an expensive exercise. In that regard, how do women then actually claim the seat on the table? In fact, when it comes to the seat of the table, it was Sheryl Sandberg, as well as with the book Lean In, who was the one coining these phrases of have a seat at the table, lean in. But Sheryl Sandberg is a woman in America who was working for Google and then worked on. So I think when you're looking at the developed world in terms of how they claim the seat on the table and the opportunities available for women versus a developing country on the African continent, I think our realities are very different. So when we say claim a seat at the table, we must be very careful that we don't use realities that are experienced by developed countries and women in developed countries versus the historical referencing that women in the developing countries are actually facing. So let's get practical about this. How do you actually create a seat at that table?
You go in there and you knock at those. It's not an overnight thing. What I've found is that you have to have because companies, for example, they are also stringent processes that they need to go through because before they can come in and say, yes, you can come and work with us. So you're right when you talk about compliance, but I have to disagree a little bit there, Faith. Compliance is not that expensive. Processes, you have to put together your own processes, unfortunately, because the people that you're working with or where you're going to apply for funding, they don't have the insight into how your own business works. So CEDA has programs where they can go and assist you if you need to put together a business plan, for example, even in terms of compliance. So it can be lack of information, but I find that mainly it's just fear. Like you don't know what to expect. But in practical terms, like you are saying, there are people that make decisions. It's sometimes, you go there and you want to speak to a receptionist, and unfortunately they can't assist. You need to know who the decision makers are in a particular space, be it a funding agency, be it corporate client that you are targeting, but you need to know who the decision makers are and have these conversations with them.
Yeah, I wish we could have more time, Connie, but it certainly does speak to how dissemination of information becomes quite critical if women are to be able to scale up their businesses, so that we don't speak about women-owned businesses as just these small enterprises, but they can actually advance from small enterprise to medium, as well as to some of the larger corporations that we're experiencing in the South African context. We have to leave it there for this morning, though. It's a businesswoman, Connie Matlejoane, who's just giving us information about how do women practically claim a seat at the table. And of course, we'll have more conversations of that nature coming up as the show progresses.